Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I will review some lessons from the bestseller and #1 book in personal finance, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I have read and reread this book a few times, and it is indeed a great book. And if you have never read it, I'm sure that you have at least heard about it because it is a reference when discussing financial literacy and investment. Rich Dad, Poor Dad tells the story of Robert Kiyosaki. Robert grew up in Hawaii, and during his childhood, he had two father figures who greatly influenced him and taught him lessons which he shares throughout this book. One dad was highly educated, very intelligent, held a PhD, attended the best colleges in the country, and was very successful in his career. However, he always had financial problems. He didn't know how to manage his money, he had terrible spending habits, and when he was gone, the only thing left for his family was tons of bills to pay. This was Kiyosaki's biological father, who in the book he refers to as his poor dad. The second father didn't even have academic achievements. In fact, he actually never even graduated from high school. But contrary to what most might think, he did believe in the importance of studying and acquiring knowledge. However, instead of studying with the purpose of graduating and working for a good company where he would have to trade his time for money, he chose to focus on ways to generate wealth by creating several streams of income. And that's how he became the wealthiest man in Hawaii and left his family an inheritance of millions of dollars. This man was the father of a friend of Kiyosaki's who in the book he refers to as his rich dad. The two men, the rich and poor dad, had different views on money, and throughout the book, Kiyosaki makes a comparison between each father's attitudes and beliefs. Although the stories took place in the 1950s because most of them happened during Kiyosaki's childhood, the lessons we can learn are timeless. So for this video, I have separated 3 of them. Lesson number 1. Don't work for money. Learn how to make money work for you. The book starts with 9-year-old Kiyosaki asking his father how he could become rich. His schoolmates were going to a beach house for the weekend and he wasn't invited because they said that he was poor. At that time, Kiyosaki was studying at a school where most students had a better financial situation than his family. His biological father, who I will be referring to as his poor dad, told him that if he wanted to become rich, he first had to learn how to make money. Kiyosaki, upon hearing this, teamed up with a friend named Mike to figure out ways to make money. Literally. The two boys started to gather tubes of toothpaste, which at that time weren't made of plastic, they were made of lead. And with that, the boys started to cast out nickels. Obviously, his poor dad found out and explained that that was illegal and suggested that if they wanted to truly learn how to get rich, they should talk to Mike's father. So the boys went to the rich dad to ask for help, and the rich dad came up with an idea. He offered them a job at his store. They would work 3 hours daily and get paid 10 cents per hour, and in the meantime, he would teach them how to get rich. Remember that this happened back in the 50s. Let's not judge how much they're being paid. And also considering inflation, 30 cents per day in the 50s is now worth roughly $3. Their job was just to remove the dust and organize the shelves, so the boys agreed to the deal and started working. A few weeks passed and the boys continued cleaning and organizing, but then Kiyosaki started to complain. He found his job boring and said his rich dad wasn't teaching him anything, which was the whole point of working at the store. At home, his poor dad also said that Kiyosaki deserved to earn more than 30 cents a day. He should be paid at least 75 cents. So Kiyosaki, super upset, went to meet with his rich dad to demand a raise and ask for the lessons that were never taught. With all the common wisdom, rich dad replied that yes, he was keeping with his end of the bargain and teaching the boys, but he was teaching them the way life does, not the way school does. What the rich dad was doing with Kiyosaki was simply mirroring real life. He wanted to show the boys that they could spend their life trading their time for money and blaming the job, low pay, or their boss for their problems. After all, that's what most people do. Or they could take charge of their life, become responsible for their future, and think of ways to generate income. Because if one can only work a limited amount of hours per day, And if they're getting paid per hour, this means that they are stuck with that wage. So instead of going down that path, Rich Dad encouraged Kiyosaki to start looking for ways to make his money generate even more income. In other words, make his money work for him. And to be clear, it's okay to be an employee. Society needs both employees and employers. The message behind this lesson is for you to be responsible. Get behind the steering wheel and choose what path you want to take. Look for ways to become a better employee or a better boss. What skills can you learn and how you can apply them to your work? Stop complaining and blaming others for your problems and explore ways to improve your financial stability. That was Kiyosaki's first lesson. He even says in the book that this inspired them to open a library of comic books where they charge the boys in the neighborhood a fee to access those books. And in this way, they began to understand and explore possible ways to earn money outside a regular job. Lesson number 2. Rich people acquire assets. The poor and the middle class acquire liabilities that they think are assets. So first of all, what is an asset and what is a liability? An asset is everything that puts money in your pocket, and a liability is everything that takes money out of your pocket. In other words, an asset will contribute to your income, while a liability would add to your expenses. Accountants and anyone who has already studied Accounting 101, don't come after me. These are Kiyosaki's definitions, and I will explain his logic. Let's use a property as an example. Suppose you own a house and rent it out. The rent the tenant pays will cover costs like mortgage, insurance, and maintenance, and the difference will contribute to your income. Therefore, this property is considered an asset. Now, suppose you bought a house and you live in it. You are responsible for covering all the costs, so owning this property does not add to your income. On the contrary, it adds to your expenses, so it is a liability. As we can see, owning a house could be either an asset or a liability. Who will determine what it will be is you. However, most people focus on owning liabilities. That's why most people are not rich. And guess what the system teaches us? Tell me if this sounds familiar. First, go to school and get good grades. If you can't afford going to school, take out a loan and spend the rest of your life paying for it. Then find a good job and start trading your time for money. And as soon as you start earning more, buy a new house and take out a car loan. And if you wish to have a nice lifestyle, max out your credit cards. After all, who doesn't have that? Continue this cycle and hope that when you get to your 60s, you can count on the government to retire. Do you know what Kiyosaki calls what I just described? He calls it the rat race. It is a never-ending cycle that just repeats itself, and most of the population spends their lives trapped in it. Because let's be honest, how many people do you know who first choose to accumulate assets that will generate income and then use that income to pay for their luxuries? Using the example of the house, have you ever met someone who preferred to buy their first house and rent it out to generate income? Income that they could use to buy their own home in the future. Almost nobody does that, either because of a lack of financial education or because of the need for instant gratification. And there is only one way to break this cycle, which brings us to lesson number 3. Lesson number 3, pay yourself first. Paying yourself first consists of having a financial plan where you allocate part of your money to spend and part to invest. And no matter what happens, you will always prioritize investing first and then living with the rest. The most common behavior is for people to receive their paycheck, pay the bills, spend on things for that week or month, and then save the difference. So I dare you to reverse that order. When the money hits your bank account, you will first pay yourself by investing and buying assets. Then you will spend. Because what will happen is, and I say this based on my own experience, even knowing that you have only X amount for expenses, the moment you see something you want, you will be tempted to spend more. And look, getting rich is not about depriving yourself of things. It is about understanding that life has to have a balance. Hey, wake up. I already spent everything I could this month. What about waiting until the next? It's all about seeking financial intelligence and being focused. And why do I make a financial plan? Why do I have to control my impulses? I do this because I want my investments to pay for my luxuries. I want the income generated from my assets to pay for my vacations, mortgage, house at the beach, and I also want to help my family. I want to be able to live on my investment returns. I don't want to spend my life trading hours for money and creating debt just to look like I am rich, to look like I can afford that lifestyle. So this is a choice that I made, that Kiyosaki made, and his rich dad too, of first accumulating assets to then accumulate liabilities. And for that, we need to pay ourselves first and forgo instant gratification. The book has several other lessons, and I could stay here for hours talking about each one, but these three are the most meaningful ones for me. Learn how to make your money work for you, acquire assets, not liabilities, and pay yourself first. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.